Welcome to the Service MVP podcast. And my name is Joe Crisara, America's service sales coach. And I have with me one of my very best friends, Steve Akian from Akian Plumbing Services in Massachusetts. Hey, Steve, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Joe.
Well, Steve, definitely we've been together for a few years now, and definitely every time, the easiest thing I ever did was fall in love with Akian Plumbing and the determination and the desire to help train your people. And Steve, why don't we first start with just sharing a little bit about your background and how you got to the point where you ran a company, owned a company, and start growing this thing.
Sure. So I've now been in the industry for 15 years. Started in residential, got into commercial shortly after that, and quickly moved into an office position where I was doing commercial sales. Within the first 3 months of that, I hit my first $3.5 million plumbing job. That was my first one of my first sales. The next day, it was another $3 million lab building fit out. And I was doing that for about 5 years, and I progressed to be their senior estimator over there. But I'd always had a passion, for being an entrepreneur, right? I was the kid in elementary school selling my Pokemon cards, putting people on what you like to call programs or, financing. Your parents give you $3 lunch money, and you could afford $1 a day, to get this Charizard. But anyways, no, but seriously, I've been in the business now for 6 years. So this business has been running for 6 years. We've been growing 33 to 50% since day one. So we're pacing 10 million this year. We specialize in heating, air conditioning, and plumbing, service, right? System replacements, like I'm sure most people that are listening to this also do. And yeah, I mean, I think we've been working together, Joe, now for 3 or 4 years.
I think so, Steve. I think so. But, like I said before, it was like an instant friendship, and I felt like I met a lost friend for life as soon as I met you, Steve. Did you have that same feeling?
I did. And when we had our first conversation, it was right here in my dining room. So it was, yeah, it was. I gave you a call. I think it was like the beginning of COVID or something like that. Mm-hmm. We were doing around 1.5 million, I think, at the time, and I just wanted to get some kind of process together. And someone recommended you, and here we are today.
Well, wow. So from 2020 to here we are in 2023, on track to make $10 million. Hey, let's give them a round of applause, everybody. That's amazing, right? That in a 3-year period, from about $1.5 million to 10 million, a lot of people wish they could achieve that. Steve, let's talk about some of the keys to achieving that. I think, let's put it this way, Steve. I always say the fish stinks from the head down, and it's always the owner's responsibility when things go bad. But, you got to take some credit when it goes good. So what are some of the things that have you worked through, and some of the things that were key to your success to be able to, let's go with the first key. What do you think is the first key to your success for getting there, yourself there?
It's funny because I was actually reflecting on this earlier this morning, and I think the biggest thing is investing in yourself. Sometimes that requires financial investment in yourself, for coaches, training, things like Service MVP, but also like get a book, right? Sitting at my table over here, right on my dining room table, right? I got John Maxwell, the Maxwell Daily Reader, right? That's an easy one. It's 1 page a day. You open it up, it gets your brain kind of thinking, and I journal a lot. So, I think the biggest thing with leadership, I think everyone focuses right away on leading others. However, you're not going to lead other people if you can't lead yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they always say, like on the airline, like when the oxygen masks drop down, please put the mask on yourself first and then help others. Does that make sense? We can't help others if we're going to pass out in the airplane. Make sense, or Steve?
Absolutely.
So you say the first thing is like, lead yourself to become a model of what's possible. So your team has nothing, they can't look at you and say, why would I follow this guy? He can't even get himself together to do his job right. Would you agree with that?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, that's not to say that I'm perfect. I'm far from it. So the other part of that is being vulnerable with your team so that when you do slip up, um, they're there to pick you up and cheer you on, and you're there to pick them up and cheer them on. It's a group effort, right?
So when you notice that you're falling short yourself, even, or whether the team is falling short, it sounds like there's no fear to confront that conflict. It sounds like you're kind of, in a way, accepting the responsibility as a leader and saying, guys, I've fallen short, and I need your help to get back on. Do I have your support to get me back on track with this? Is that kind of what you're talking about there, Steve? Tell me a little bit about your methodology, or what you feel is a good way to kind of get started when you see things that are going wrong. Because some people see things that are going wrong and they make their team defeated rather than inspiring their team. Tell me about that.
Yeah. This podcast comes at such great timing, Joe, right? Because there's so many people talking about the economy, and it's an election year and all this stuff. And, we just had our biggest month yet, right? We 950,000 in revenue, another month where we exceeded $1 million in sales. It's the type of thing where when there's troubled waters ahead, right? It's important to plan. It's important to collaborate. And I think when you do that with your team and they have input on what it is that we should do, right? That's when you have ultimate. I don't like to use this phrase, but that's when you have ultimate buy-in, I think, from everybody. And you sort of have that, if you ever seen the movie 300, right? The Persians are shooting their arrows at the Greeks, yep. And they're all huddled together with their shields, and they're laughing. They're laughing as the arrows are, right? But that's the power of teamwork. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, the team working together is much stronger than any one individual can be. With that being said, so taking responsibility as a leader, it sounds like that was, and then developing yourself. You got to start with that. So then you're saying, okay, now that I am feeling like I'm getting a foothold here, and the team does believe that I am making an effort, they can see the effort you're making. What's the next step? What do you think would be the next step to get the team moving the right direction? Because they can see you doing things. Like I said, I would expect somebody else to finish a course if the leader hasn't finished it first, right? Or somebody else to read that, like giving that leadership book to someone on your team. Have you read it, Steve? Oh no, I don't read very well. I'm not a good reader. It's not a very good leadership move. But what do you think the next step is then to work with the team? Then how would you reach out from there?
So, speaking specifically, let's use that example you used about the book, right? Every time I recommend a book to someone on my leadership team, or even to the person in the warehouse, right? Who, by the way, won Employee of the Month this morning. We had one of our company-wide meetings this morning, and one of our warehouse personnel, Malik, he's listening to this. He's an outstanding, person. But when I hand that book to them, I let them know I read it and why I'm specifically, giving it to them, because I think it will benefit them in, reasons X, Y, and Z. And then get out of the way. I was about to swear. I don't know if we could do that on this podcast. But,
go ahead. It's okay to swear. We'll put the E next to it for explicit language if we have to. Go ahead. It's okay.
Joe, I think that's one thing that holds companies back from growth is perfectionism. Give your people the resources and get the fuck out of the way. Let them know that you're there for them, and then just move out of the way. Like, a lot of people kind of have their hands on everything, and it's just not a realistic way to scale the business. I think it's a quick way to put yourself 6 feet under, actually.
Steve, let's talk about, I love what you're saying. Invest in yourself first. Read, devour material to kind of get better yourself and feed your brain, and then reinvest in the resources for your team and give them the material, whatever they need, and then the resource they need, and then get out of the way. How about the accountability? You can't grow to 10 million if people are just free ranging out there. How do you how have you learned how to achieve a sense of accountability that if I have these resources, because the worst enemy, getting resources for people and they never use it, Steve, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And that's where my management team comes into place. My brother, who's been with me pretty much since day one, runs the company with me. Marissa, who runs the install departments, and Sean, who is our controller, right? They're three people who definitely help me on that end, because you know what? It's not just me holding them accountable, but it's them holding me accountable and having the trust in me that they could say, hey, Steve, look, I think you're messing up here. And that's where being vulnerable is so crucial, because if you don't have the trust, you're not going to have the team that's going to come to you and say, hey, how about this? This is what you're doing. And that's it in a nutshell, Joe. It's like, we could put all the processes and procedures together, but like you said, if you don't have the people who not only are you inspiring, but are inspiring you to do a better job. I mean, I think that's the magic, behind it all. Because there's 42 people in our company now, Joe, and I can't have my hand on every single one of them. You know what I mean?
But I do remember early in the process when we first met that you guys and you and Alex, who was your brother, who happens to be a musician too. And I remember we had to share that common bond with him and I being musicians together. I played bass and he played guitar and stuff like that. So yeah, we got to get the band together, Alex. And I remember all that. But I do remember some turbulence when we first tried to get the team to do this. I mean, getting people from Massachusetts who are very intelligent people who think they got kind of their own way of doing things. Yet I've seen some of those same people who were giving us turbulence now kind of like gliding and water skiing on that water. Now they're on top of that water. Tell us a little bit about how you would advise other owners here to fight through the turbulence that they get. Even though you're trying to do this on the team's best, you're in your heart, you're trying to help your team and give them the resources. Sometimes they fight you back on accepting those resources. That's what we had. Remember that when we first started out with that? And then somehow you got, I didn't know behind the scenes what happened, but I'm happy to see that on the other end, you got through this turbulence. What was it the key for you to get through that turbulence and get the team to stay on track here?
I think first off, being genuine is super important. I hate that I have to say that, but that's really it. Is when we onboarded with you, Joe, I was like, I totally get this program. I totally understand how it works. And unfortunately, we had some people that were pushing back. And the thing is that force is only going to be met with force, right? So seek first to understand, right? Understand what it is that they're trying to say to you. And at the end of the day, Joe, it's like, they're like, we're learning about persuasion and influence and all this stuff. And then I'm like, okay, please tell me more, right? And then what I flip on them was like, okay, so it's okay for you to persuade me that your way of doing things is okay, but you're not willing to give this program a shot, right? And that broke through to a lot of people on our team. But I have to say, Joe,
time out. So you're saying that basically you flipped the script, like, Joe, I mean, you're trying to, you said this program is about learning persuasion, and here you are exactly doing what we're trying to teach you by persuading me to not do what we invested in you. Do you see that? Like kind of putting the mirror in front of them. Did a lot of people have that kind of look, like the Affleck duck look on their face, like, huh, because I guess you're right. How did that go, Steve? Tell me about that.
Well, first off, I want to say that it was really only a small couple of people.
Yeah, I get that. It wasn't everybody. That's all it takes, though, is a small group of people to create chaos, though, right?
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, once we had that conversation, it was kind of an aha moment for that person. And that goes back to, like, Joe, the older version of me probably wouldn't have had such a, skillful conversation. They probably would have just been like, look, this is what we're doing. Just fucking do it. You know what I mean? Right?
He was brute force before in the old days. It's like, don't you know who I am? I own the company. But anyway, that's really great. So, I mean, yeah, you kind of learn how to get them to come around to that point of view? In a way, you're kind of like, using a, so if I said to you, leaders sometimes say, listen, I'm not in sales, I'm just the leader here. What would you say to them about that?
I think one way or another, we're all in sales. It's communication. I mean, all the way from, the parents that are in our company that are trying to get their kids to do homework and go to bed, all the way to when our managers are interviewing people. Like when you have someone coming in, you're selling them on the company's vision. You're selling them on, the team and the goal. And, I think you're the one that told me this, Joe, but the word sales, I think, derives from a Latin word service, right? And I think a lot of us forget that. And I think a lot of us forget that because unfortunately, these persuasion tools are sometimes used, in bad ways. It's just like anything else, right? It can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And it all comes back down to intention. What your
so the motivation of the owner. And Steve, how often do you have to, even though people could assume, like I could assume that Steve Akian's got the right motive, but how often do you have to remind people of that motive to make sure that they're clear about your motivation and not just assume that they think they know it?
We do that with our mission statement, our core values, but most importantly, the one-on-one communication rhythms that we have in the company. So I have my one-on-ones with my management team. They have their one-on-ones with their staff and so on and so forth. And, that's just it. It's like, if you have to go around telling people that you're a genuine guy all the time, like, you know what I mean? It's probably something fishy going on. But we all just genuinely care about each other at this company. When I see someone, like this morning we had our company wide, I show up early for those because I want to see people. I want to talk to them. I want to find out how that new house Evan got is, coming along because he's doing a bunch of work on it. I want to talk to Manny about how, his kid, my godson, by the way, Leo, Manny, Manny, Joe, he was one of our first guys to graduate the program.
I remember him, yeah.
So he's got a 2-year-old. I'm his, his son's godfather. Like one of like the most amazing things to ever happen to me. But it's stuff like that where like everyone's talking about culture. Like culture is not the video game system that you have in the office. It's the people. It's who they're, what their fiber is made up of. Like, right? What is their makeup? What are their values? What are their beliefs? Right? And that's again going back to the mission statement and core values. That's where, I got to say early on in the business, Joe, I really underestimated core values and mission statement because now when people come on board day one, so in the interview process, we go over the mission statement and core values and their entire first onboarding day. That first half of that day is mission statement and core value stuff, right? And it's important to do that because, okay, now I really know if it's going to work out with this person early on because, if teamwork, communication, excellence, perseverance and growth, if those aren't, values of yours in some, shape or form, it's probably not going to work here.
Might as well find out fast. And it sounds, I don't want to, maybe I'll summarize what you said there because it was pretty powerful. I try to get a harness on it so people can kind of digest this. Was instead of telling people your motivation, you're showing them your motivation by your actions. You don't got to tell people how you're motivated. You show them how you're motivated by actions. Does that make sense there, Steve?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's times when, you have to roll your sleeves up and get to work. Don't be shy of showing your team the hard work that you have to put in, as a leader, as an owner. This world isn't perfect and this business isn't, and neither is anybody's, right? So again, it kind of loops back to the vulnerability part, Joe, where we all feel comfortable talking to each other because they see me fuck up too.
Yeah, Steve, you're hitting a nerve right there because even here at Service MVP, we're not immune to bringing, as we grow, it creates new training opportunities that we have recently begun to re-embrace ourselves, because you grow to a different size of a company. $10 million company is different than a $1 million company. And you're kind of learning all over. You have to be vulnerable enough at each one of those steps to admit that this is a different challenge than I had when I was at 1 million. Steve, tell us about that a little bit.
Absolutely. I say that just about at every quarterly, we have quarterly offsite meetings with the management team. And I do make it a point to say that, hey guys, like, you know, we did 6 million last year. Now we're pacing, 10. I've never led a $10 million company before. And then last year I said, hey guys, we're doing 6 million this year. Last year we did 4. I've never led a $6 million. And I say that because that does act as a reminder, because I think sometimes when people see the leader, and this is where self-awareness comes back in, when people see the leader, sometimes they think of them as this, like, kind of impenetrable, perfect being that's on a pedestal, knows all the answers. Look, I do not know all the answers. However, I will do my best to be a better person today than I was yesterday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think one thing if I've heard from your team, is that you're great at helping. You may not have all the answers, but everybody's told me on your team that you're really great at helping them find the answers for themselves. Does that make sense for Steve?
It does, and I think some of them would. I'm really big on letting people find their own answers, right? And I'll monitor that. I'll make sure they don't crash and burn. But I'll tell you, Joe, I let them get damn near close to crashing and burning, because
that's how we learn. We don't learn if you're in anybody who's in a plumbing business knows that you're not going to be a good plumber if you haven't screwed up a fitting and made it leak. That's the only way you're going to get good at making fittings not leak, is by having ones that did in the beginning. Does that make sense, Steve?
It does, and the first question that I always ask, anyone that comes to me for an answer, when they're asking me a question, is, what do you think you should do? What's the right thing to do? Let them think about it. Let them come up with an answer, and then they usually give me the right one, Joe.
Right. It's like, well, give me your thoughts. What would you say if it was your company? What would you do? Right. That's a good one to put there. And wow, Steve, you know what? I knew it was going to be a great interview today, and it didn't disappoint. You always say a good podcast starts on time, but a great one ends on time. So I'm going to end the podcast portion of this right now, and we are going to go ahead and take some questions from our team. Everybody have a great one. We will see you on the next podcast, but hold on, everybody.